maybe you are the first one to feel the market, which can be true. And maybe you're gonna be the first one that started this. But this doesn't mean that you're gonna be the best forever. Because once your brand is gonna work, the competitors are going to show up.
Hello, Klaudio. Thank you for joining us on season 2 of Tea with ALSA. Now, for those who are listening, some of you guys may not know Klaudio by his real name, but you might know him by his brand Learnshqip, with over 60,000 followers on Instagram and a lot more on TikTok and a few thousand on YouTube as well. I believe this is the first time you're doing a face reveal, so we get the pleasure of showcasing the world your face. So,
Yeah,
Klaudio.
finally. Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation. It's my pleasure to be here and share my story with you. And yeah, it is true. This is my first time ever. I'm, let's say, kind of revealing myself, because most of the times I just do my work and promote, let's say, mainly the Albanian culture and the Albanian history. But it's not very, very personal. If you see my account on my Instagram, it's more about the Albanian language and history rather than about me.
Yeah. So I guess the first question is going to be, why did you start, or how did you get to start to creating the brand Learnshqip? Because we also have a funny way of actually knowing each other as well through a friend. So
yes, through one of my students actually, and which is also she's also your friend, and she's also my friend now. But well, basically the history started in 2020 when COVID came. So I know that for most people the pandemic was a very, very bad situation, but personally for me it was the best situation ever that happened in my life, because 1 week later, when after the quarantine started, I had the chance to open Learnshqip. Now, first of all, the main reason why I opened it was because I have a teaching background, meaning I have a diploma in English teaching and I have knowledge about linguistics. And basically, I saw a gap in the market, which was teaching Albanian, and I just decided to open the brand, and thankfully it worked so far.
nice. So I mean, you seem to be very you have the same story as a lot of people who started up during the pandemic. But you started this off as part of the teaching course, teaching people, and then expanding that. But I guess what made you want to expand it into more of a part of a bigger brand, rather than just staying to, hey, I'm just gonna focus working on one-to-one students. I actually want this to be also part of like a little bit of a mini media world as well.
Well, definitely. First of all, the main reason why I opened it at the very beginning, it was about teaching Albanian. But then throughout the time, I was like, wait a second, there is a gap in the market about not just about teaching Albanian, because of course teaching Albanian is very, very important, and I want to help people learn Albanian. But moreover, I was thinking there is a gap about sharing Albanian culture. And when I mean sharing Albanian culture, I mean sharing it in a very, very professional way, not by sharing memes, which is totally fine, but it's about sharing it in a professional way so people can learn more about our language, can learn more about our culture, and moreover, they can also learn more about the history. And I was saying, first of all, the name had to be something that represents all Albanians. Because I could also open then, let's say, for example, Learn Albanian with Klaudio. I could do that, but I was like, I have to think about something that unifies all Albanians. And I was like, what about having Albanians, which are part of our culture because they're Albanians, also including foreigners in the name? And I was like, if you do it, Learn Albanian is going to be very, very boring. So what about Learnshqip? Because Learn belongs to the foreigners and Ship, of course, belongs to Albanians. And it just started like that. And then throughout the time, I was just experimenting, sharing more things about Albanians, sharing more things about the culture, and people were enjoying it. And, so far, everything has gone so well.
That's a very interesting creative take on the name, and when it comes to branding, on how you dissected it between people foreign to also people from back home, and mixing the two to create a brand and make it stand out. and I guess moving on to like, because I always found you quite more on the creative, very good marketer,
Well, I
social
mean,
media,
yeah, I'm
trial and error. And so you've been doing that for a while now, and growing your own Instagram following. What has been some key things that have helped you grow? What has it been? Being consistent? Has it been being trial and error? What have been the key things to growing your brand?
Well, I mean, first of all, I wouldn't say I was very lucky, but I would say that the timing when I started everything was a very very good timing because it was quarantine, so basically everyone was at home and was bored. But that's my focus. Most of the times people, and that's something that many people do, they focus on too many things at the very beginning, which I didn't actually. I was like, look, I'm going to focus on one thing, I'm going to learn that thing very well, and then I'm going to just keep doing it better and better every day. And thankfully for me, Instagram just went viral, especially after the second year. Because some people see now, oh, 60,000 followers, big audience. Remember that in 1 year, I had 5,000 followers. On the second year, from 5, we went to 30. And now this is our third year, which are under, let's say, 60K. But it's a long process. The most important thing about growing, let's say, something on Instagram is about, first of all, solving a problem, which is very, very important, because that's the main reason why people are going to follow you. And the second reason is posting things that people are going to save or share, because that's the only way Instagram is going to push your posts more and more. And I try to do things and post things which are useful to people and people can share them and also save them in order to learn something for free. Because keep in mind, for me, this brand is not just about earning some money and paying my bills. Of course, that's very important because I have to pay my bills as well. But moreover, for me, it was offering something which is accessible for every person, which means if you want to learn something about Albanian language, you can do it for free via my Instagram page or maybe going to YouTube channel, meaning doing it accessible for every single person. So anyone can learn something about Albania, about our culture, about our history, and have a perception, a better perception. Sometimes we are famous about bad things throughout the world, mainly about, what I don't want to mention it, but about, some things, and also about our dictator, Enver Hoxha. These are two things we are famous for. So we just have to make sure that let people know that Albania is not always what the perception is, but is about something else. And we have to learn about our culture. And that's the only way we can make our country better, I guess.
Mm. I mean, yeah, that's a very good intake into producing something of value, and exerting, I guess, that culture outwards as well to people. And like you mentioned, with the economy, well, the digital economy, it's like the best time to do that because we can reach lots of people, various different demographics, interest groups, intent groups, um, which you can do now with Learnshqip. Um, I guess kind of moving backwards a little bit. It's always interesting to kind of hear, I guess, your upbringing. It's always interesting to hear if you were always an entrepreneurial type, or did this come by just a lots of trial and error? Because you're also, we talk to loads of founders, and a lot of them are either diaspora, or there's a few people that we have interviewed that are, living in Albania, and you're one of those that's currently living in Albania, so you're at the forefront, everything that's
Yeah,
going
I
on.
live
So
here.
it'll be good to kind of hear, I guess, how you kind of, you know, uh, uh, I guess, grew up with that entrepreneurial spirit in Albania.
Yeah, for sure. So first of all, not many people know, but I live in Albania. So I've been living in Albania for forever since I was born, and I'm living currently in my hometown, which is Pogradec, which is located in the southern eastern of Albania. It's very close to North Macedonia, basically just 30 minutes. Now, regarding on how I started, I would say I'm the perfect example on how to start everything from scratch. And when I mean from scratch, I mean really from scratch. Having no knowledge whatsoever about digital marketing, having no knowledge about designing, having no knowledge about social media platforms, and etc. So everything started about improvising and experimenting. At the very beginning, I just had my name on my mind, Learnshqip. I'm gonna make that and post something about Albania. Now, the best way to see how I started is by going on my page and scrolling down and seeing my first post. If you see those ones, they are some, I wouldn't call them silly, but they are some very, very funny cartoons which are not very professional, you know, but that was the only thing I knew. And then throughout the time I was working and working every day. Keep in mind that, you know, I didn't learn these things by just experimenting. Of course, I was watching YouTube, you know, YouTube channels, watching videos, learning more and reading books. But for me, the main difference that really got me through this platform was consistency. And I know some people say, oh, you have to be good, you have to be that. Of course, but keep in mind, you only get better by doing and working every single day. And I've been doing that for the last 3 years. I would say in the last 3 years, maybe I haven't posted in, I would say, 5 days. In 3 years, I haven't posted only
Mm.
5 days. So in 3 years, only from these 5 days, I've posted every single day stories, designs, because that's always about consistency. The more you post, the more you learn, and then the more you learn about the culture, you learn more about the people, and then you see what things can go well, but what things can go work, doesn't work, and things that can work. And then, of course, you just try to not repeat the same mistakes, and we move on, and you get better and get better. It's about crafting your work. That's the most important thing.
Mm. Yeah, no, definitely consistency, and able to see when you are making mistakes and adjusting to those,
And
and
moreover,
just
moreover, we have discussed this previously. There is a misconception about my brand. You know, many people think that there is a group of people managing the brand. Actually, it's just me. And I'm not saying this one to brag and say I'm smart or whatever. No, I'm just saying that any person can do that. Even by just being one person, you can easily manage social media, YouTube channels, everything by just being one person. So it's something that anyone can do it as long as you have the determination and you also have the consistency.
mm, mm. And I guess, you know, with that, because, you know, if you look at people from, you know, your similar circumstances, um, in the environment you were brought up in, loads of people would probably assume, and I say this as someone with family back home, where you get a mix of ideas. Some people are very much like, there's not much opportunity here, there's not a lot you can really do. And then there's other people like yourself, who I also talk to, who are very much like, you know, yeah, things are difficult, but there is opportunity. It's just you have to be willing to put the work in, and have that mindset. So I guess to a lot of other younger people who are in your same position, what has been some of the mind shifts you've had to take to position yourself to take on those opportunities and not really see it as a disadvantage, and see it more as a learning opportunity?
Look, there is something that we should not deny. Recently, Albania, especially in the last few years, many people are trying to immigrate or leave the country for a better future, which is totally fair and fine. I'm not saying why people are leaving; it's their right and choice to leave their country. But I do believe that, for example, if you are a student like me and you have done your studies in Albania, let's say you have done 5 years of your studies, that's usually the average. An average student in Albania is going to study maybe 5 to 6 years of his life, meaning 5 or 6 years of his life are invested in Albania, the education, etc. So I think I'm not saying you should not leave the country. I'm saying that first of all, try everything that is possible in your country, and then if things doesn't work, then maybe you can consider leaving the country. But I don't think that you should take the first option, living. You know what I mean? You just have to stay, try, craft your work. And I know it's difficult. I know that, sometimes things don't go well. But keep in mind that, especially after pandemic, now any person can do something about offering his service. And when I mean offering a service, I mean the same thing as I did it. I am a teacher, and the only thing I did was creating a brand on my social media, and that's how I got my students. But if you are a doctor, if you are a psychologist, if you are whatever, a vet, you can easily do the same thing as I did. Open something on Instagram, open a brand, and just offer your services. What do you do? What problems you solve? The most important thing is about solving problems. And I do believe that it's better to work as a teacher in Albania, or maybe as a vet, as a nurse, rather than going into Germany and, let's be honest, cleaning dishes or doing something else. I have nothing against cleaning dishes. Every person that does that is more than respected. But at the same time, keep in mind that you have invested 5 or 6 years of your life in Albania. So it's not good to throw everything into the garbage and then just go and find the easiest thing, which is about leaving the country. I think it's about, first of all, insisting in doing what you like, and then if things work, may God bless you, and then if things don't work, you can just try other options.
Mm. Yeah, no, I think one thing to definitely mention again is that there's obviously various reasons for people wanting to leave. But like you said, there is also a misconception that we tend to see, which is people back home who might, and I think this is something, you know, people of diaspora see a lot, is people back home have a misconception of how easy it is in the UK, in Germany, in these other countries,
It's
where
not easy, yeah.
yeah, you're right, you can, I think the ceiling is not as low, so you can definitely make more for yourself. There's definitely more infrastructure if you got a business idea to help you out. But if you don't have that willingness, it's not going to work. And actually, it's a lot harder I mean, especially in London. I mean, the cost of living and everything right now, which is also affecting the rest of the world. But in
And
cities
I
like
think
London,
many people, sometimes, at
yeah,
least Albanians, they are forgetting the market. So
mm,
before you move to any country, and this is about being smart and being wise, before you move to any country, or before you open any profession, or before you have any idea, the first thing you have to do is studying the market. Meaning, how big is this market? Who are my competitors? And which are going to be my challenges? Now, for example, if you make a comparison between the market of London and the market of Tirana, or even Albania, let's call it, the market of London, I have no doubts, is full of ideas, full of businesses, full of projects, full of many things. Now, if you come and you do a very, very detailed study market in Albania, there are so empty places that people have to fill. And they are doing it now. They are filling it. And when I mean different ideas, any sort of idea, social media manager, for example, is one of the things which is a very, very big gap in Albania. There are not many social media managers in Albania, which are now, but not many. And there are so many gaps in the market. So it's better to find something that you can fill the market, because it's going to be way too easy for you to grow and succeed. And it doesn't matter if you open something online. It doesn't matter whether you're in London, whether you're in Albania. You're going to be basically everywhere. You're going to be based everywhere. The only thing is to find something that is a gap on the market. And honestly, and I do believe that the market of Albania is way, way more empty than the market of England. And I think you can double confirm that.
yeah. Also, I think one thing to also mention on top of that is that, you know, because now we're in this digital economy, you can connect to other markets by still being in Albania, which can benefit you.
This is
And
what I'm saying, you know?
something that I think I've seen in Kosovo is digital agencies. They're able to train up young students, get them skilled up on, you know, media buying, media selling, and then offering that service to European, you know, brands for a cheaper rate, so they're able to cut competition, but a
And
lot
there are
higher
so many
than,
people which are doing that in Albania recently,
yeah,
and also in Kosovo. And I believe in terms of digital marketing, I think Kosovo is a bit better than Albania in terms of
yeah.
that. They are a bit more advanced, which is fine, you know. But I mean, even in Albania, is a market which is being advanced now, but it's something that people have to consider and think about that, which is very, very important.
Yeah, but I think that also goes back into, if you think about something as simple as, you know, like you said, if you are maybe a dentist, you know, what's not to say that you can't turn your business into something that's happening in Turkey, where you are, instead of targeting diaspora, you're also targeting British folks who are looking for,
Yeah,
you
of
know, new
course.
places to travel. Like, I think there has to be that sort of change in thinking to being like, how do I expand my market share? And that could be by connecting to other points of, you know, the European continent. So who else can come to Albania? Well, tourists, travelers, you know, so let's reach out to those.
And people have to be smart, you know. And when
Yeah,
I mean by people have to be smart, and we as Albanians, when we have a business idea, and that's typical Albanian, the first idea we have in our mind, and I don't blame any Albanian that has this idea, is opening a coffee shop.
yeah,
Like, and I know, you know, it's something that we have it, but like, please, like, be smart, guys, you know. Just do something which is like something that can really benefit opening a coffee shop is something incredible, but we know that in Albania, every 10 meters, we have a coffee shop. So that's not something
Yeah.
like you are creating it. It's something that you need to create, which is emptying the market. And I'm saying that to any person, anyone can do it. Like you mentioned, a dentist, a vet, just offering advices on how you do your work, or what service do you offer. And I'm pretty sure it's going to succeed. And to any person.
Yeah. Also, I mean, something as simple as also just creating an agency to connect certain industry services to people who are looking for those is another thing, which is very common in across the world. Whether that's, you know, an agency to connect people to marketing services or another form of services, that's also something that can be done as well. So yeah, definitely finding that gap in the market can benefit a lot of, and that's also something that I would recommend a lot of like young people to start thinking about and to play around with, is what's the gap in the market and what can you test and try out, and seeing how it forms. And one of the good things with the digital markets is that it's easier to set up than a brick and mortar. You know, a
Yes.
brick and mortar will require a lot of cash investment, whereas your digital investment requires more timing rather than brick and mortar. And one of the good things with digital nowadays is that everything's online. You can
Yes.
literally
I was
use
about to say.
chat gpt to help create your website. There's so many ways to do things and to
Now, I
uh,
mean, I think that not
systemize.
many people, that's for sure. I was about to say that. I don't think that many people are realizing that after COVID, not after COVID, I would say after the pandemic or after the
Mm,
quarantine, the world shifted.
yeah.
Now, some people noticed that and some people didn't. When I mean shifted, I mean that now, let's say only 1 month before COVID, if you could ask someone and you could tell someone in Albania, I work online, people were like, you are out of space. Like, what are you doing?
Mm,
Like, what is this thing? It doesn't even exist as a concept in Albania. But after the pandemic, even in Albania, even in the world, people realize that, oh, wait a second, I can do my work from my home. I don't have to go somewhere else. Or I can open a brand from my house. I can open something that can benefit to the people, and which is very, very accessible now, which means that now, basically, the world has no borders, meaning
mm.
that through your brand you can reach people in the United States, you can reach you can reach people in UK, you can reach people in Italy, everywhere in the world through your brand, because now the world has shifted to online, and it's way more easier now to grow your social media platform than it was before. Why? Because now everyone is focused on that, and it's more easier to find the people which are there rather than just searching physically. Let's say it's impossible to do that. So the only way to reach more people is by shifting your business into something online, because that's the only way you're going to reach more and more people every day.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Definitely, you know, changing the strategy to increase digital foot traffic rather than, you know, actual foot traffic will benefit you. And I think something, you know, if you, something you mentioned earlier, which we talked about as well, is filling the market with what is not already there. And something that I've seen successful businesses do across all over the world, which people forget about, is a great story is, I believe there was a guy in Malaysia who created an Uber app. He did the exact same thing Uber did. He created it. He didn't even do anything special. The only thing he focused on is, I know my market better than Uber knows my market. So that's his competitive advantage. His competitive
That's
advantage
right.
is, I know my people more than Uber knows my people. So he built that and he was able to beat uh, Uber's competition in Malaysia. And through that, he was able to build a super app. And I mean, there's stories of people in Dubai who build Uber competitors because they know their market more than Uber. And then because they end up beating Uber, they're like, well, now I can sell it to Uber for 1.3 billion, which I believe is what
And
happened
that's
in
for sure.
Dubai. You know, a
Because
taxi service company sold them.
and why
Yeah.
they have done that, why have they succeeded? Because for them, the market where they started was way, way familiar. Why? They knew everything. So for example, that's why I was saying that first of all, before you decide to, let's say, move Albania or go to another country, I think that it's very, very important to at least try something in your country. Why? First of all, you live in your country, you are Albanian. So for example, I live in Albania, I'm Albanian, I know my people, I know my culture, I know the streets, I know the market, I know how everything works here. So for me, for example, if I would be in UK and I would have done the same thing, meaning opening Learnshqip, the same idea, the same project, I do believe that I would have less audience than I have now. And I think for me, living in Albania has been a very, very good thing because I live here. I know everything about our country. I know everything about our culture, and I have no doubts you know it as well. But when you live here, you live everything with the country. You know, you see everything. You see how people work. You see how people live. You see how people think, and you also know how can you work better in your market. And it's easier for you because you are familiar with everything. You know what are the gaps. You know what things you can work, you cannot work, what can you improve, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, no, definitely. Having that competitive advantage will benefit you, which I think a lot of people unfortunately don't realize that there is a lot of advantages that they could have if they are looking to start a business. And obviously, you know, something to mention, which we talked about, is that it's always hard to predict people's circumstances, especially in, you know, something I always like to mention is that although Albania has been an independent nation for over 100 years, it's only just left communism in the last 30, and it's only just started to
Yes.
really develop over the last, you know, few decades, basically. So to a lot of people, it's still new. You know, to a lot of people, they're just hearing about Albania as a tourist destination. You know, I think when I was younger, no one knew about Albania. They were like, Armenia?
Yeah,
Where's
Armenia. I mean,
Albania?
well, I had the
Armenia?
same issue. I was in Turkey, so a couple of months ago, which is like a crazy story actually. A couple of months ago, before founding Learnshqip, I was living in Turkey on the main place where the earthquake happened. In the city where I used to live, around 10,000 people died actually. So I
Wow.
left that city a couple of months later, and then so I left that city in January, and then in March, 2 months later, I had the opportunity to open Learnshqip. And when I was in Turkey, I was in a very, very far region, very close to Syria. And whenever I was telling people I am from Albania, Armenia, in terms of geographic, it's very, very close to them.
Yeah.
So whenever I was saying Albania, they were saying Armenia. I was like, no, no, Albania. So you also had to tell them the nationality, like Arnaut or something like that in Turkey, so
Yeah.
they could know you are from Albania, because no one knew Albania was even a country because we were so far away from each other.
Yeah. Yeah. No. But now if you talk to people, everyone will know of Albania. They'll be like, oh yeah, you know, they'll mention Dua Lipa, they'll mention Rita
Yes.
Ora, they'll mention, you know, footballers, they'll mention the tourism and all that stuff. So yeah, it is getting bigger. So one thing and this is a common thing that I've had when talking to other guests is I feel like we're still in the beginning stage of, you know, things getting better because
Yes.
we only just left the,
The
you know,
communism, and people
the
don't
community and
remember,
also, yeah,
communism
absolutely.
communism fell in 1990s, but after that there was also a long procedure until we got fully function as a country. So from 1990s until I would say 2001, 2002, that's where the country really started developing. So from 2002, 2004. So recently, let's say we have been doing tourism mainly in the last 20 years. So we don't have enough experience, but we are getting better every day, and that's something that we are improving.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and those things are very key to remember. And I think people forget the history that hey, like, yeah, you know, things may not be as well as we would like it to be because we're comparing ourselves to other countries, but this is the cards we're dealt with, and this is what we got to work with, and this is how we can make it. You know, with the investment that we do have, this is what we have to do. Um, But yeah, no, and I guess, you know, kind of to kind of shift back to because I really do like this topic of homegrown brands because we don't hear enough about it. We hear a lot about Albanian brands outside, but we don't hear enough about homegrown brands inside, which is such a shame because there is
Yes.
talent. That's not to say that there isn't talent. That's not to say that there isn't hardworking people. There isn't smart
And
people.
there is a
There is.
problem with that. I would say there is a problem with that. And I wouldn't say I've suffered. I haven't suffered, but that's a conception that many people have. That if you study in Albania, at least if you, especially if you don't study in Tirana, like for example, I haven't studied in Tirana, so I have studied in a city very close to my hometown. And in general, people have the idea that when you study in another city, you are not smart enough. Or for example, if you have a degree from UK and you have a degree from Albania, maybe someone will think, okay, this guy from Britain is better than this guy from Albania. And I fully believe, and I'm telling you this to everyone which is in Albania and is a student, it's not about your paper diploma. It's always about your personality. It's always about your character. So it doesn't matter where you live. You can be in Tirana. You can also be in Koprik. You can be in north of Albania, or you can also be in Gjirokastër, in the south of Albania. It doesn't matter where you are. It's always about your skills. It's always about what you want and how hard you want to try to achieve that thing. And the more we do these things, the better it is, because we need more Albanians that are in Albania and open a brand here to give an example to everyone that, look, leaving the country is not always a choice. And I'm not saying that you should not leave the country. If you want, that's your choice. But I'm not saying that's the solution. There are so many people here like me, and I'm not the only one, and I do believe that. There are so many people like me that have a brand here, are working in Albania, and are making their own profit, let's say. So don't think about moving here, let's say leaving the country. If you have a background here, try to work hard and open something here, because we can also be an example. You know, we can unify like we are doing this interview. It's better for you to stay here, and also by try to find as many brands as possible which are Albanians, like we are doing it right now, and try to share your experience. You know, try to connect and expand your circle, because the more you're gonna do that, the better you're gonna be, and the more experience you're gonna have. And it's also about sharing each other's experience. You know, you can find Albanians that have something in UK, and then also Albanians that have something in Tirana, and then share experience. What works there, what doesn't work here, how can we improve it, and etc.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Something to also mention. We've recently had an interview with a lovely guest named Ardiana, who actually lived in Norway and moved to Kosovo to set up her business, and she now lives there full time with her business. And I think she's been there since 2019, I believe. So there is, you do see a lot of people who are also moving back to Albania and Kosovo to set up businesses with the knowledge that they have gained. But something I do want to also touch on, which you mentioned, and which I completely agree with, is that just because you went to school in London, there is no difference. Like business does not care.
Not everyone can afford living in UK or studying in UK. So it's not just about how smart or good you are. It's always about if you have the opportunity. So just try to invest in yourself, because that is going to make you better, not UK, Germany, or Albania.
Yeah, and also one thing is like we talked about now with businesses and brands, you can reach out to the rest of the world. That also means you yourself, with your own personal brand, can reach out to the rest of the world. You have your own Twitter, you have your own YouTube, that LinkedIn. You can connect with people. That people are always looking for like-minded people to work with. They rarely do they care now about what uni you went to or anything like that.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Don't get me wrong. If you want to be a doctor, absolutely you need to go to
Of course,
university.
of course. But I
But
mean,
if
just to support
business,
your argument. So, and I'm not saying that because you don't need of course you need a diploma in order to become a teacher. I'm not saying that in order to neglect the importance of
yeah, of
diploma.
course.
But I'm being honest. In 3 years of my work, no one has ever asked me if I have a diploma or not. Now, this doesn't mean you have to become a teacher without a diploma, of course. But keep in mind, the most important thing, people will value your skills.
Mhm.
So, for example, maybe I have a passport, or maybe I have a diploma in UK, but I'm not able to teach Albanian in the right way. You think people will stay with me just because I have UK diploma? No, they don't care about your diploma. They care about what value do you give. So as long as you give the right value to the people, that's the most important one. So you don't have to worry if you are living in UK, if you have an Albanian diploma or whatever. It's just about being better, having the right skills, and giving the right value.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you on that. But something I do want to bring up, which as much as I'm someone who's very much like your diploma doesn't determine who you are, I'm a firm believer in education, and in terms of getting the right education.
For sure, because
Do
if you want to become a doctor, as you said, for example, you cannot improvise and go and do a surgery. You know what I mean? Of
Yeah,
course, you need something that guarantees you that you're going to do the right work.
but also even in the terms of your case, you yourself, you sought out education to get better at social media marketing. So that is still
Yes,
there. So I think it's always important to remember that you have to seek out education for that return on investment in yourself. You shouldn't just neglect it and be like, oh, well, I know the market. You should always be willing to learn more and
you need to
fill
learn your
those.
skills, because
Yeah.
unfortunately this is not just about Albania, but this is just in general about schools or education.
Mm.
Rarely you're going to learn digital marketing at school as a subject. Rarely you're going to learn how to manage money and etc. So these things you have to learn them by yourself. So that's the only thing. Of course you have a diploma, of course you have a teaching background, and you know how to explain grammar, you know how to say how this thing is, what tense it is, and etc. But moreover, you need some skills that will divide you from your competitors. Because keep in mind, maybe you are the first one to fill the market, which can be true. And maybe you're going to be the first one that started this. But this doesn't mean that you're going to be the best forever. Because once your brand is going to work, the competitors are going to show up because they see your brand is working and they're going to try to copycat your work. Sometimes it can work, sometimes it cannot, but you should always be awake in terms of being awake and checking your competitors and checking your work, and always invest and become better. Because the more better you become, the quicker and faster you go. And that is going to be more difficult for your competitors to catch. If you stop and you think, oh, I'm good, no one is going to beat me, it's just a matter of time before you lose all of your customers.
Yeah, no, mate, you've like pinned the nail on the head there, which is, yeah, absolutely. As soon as you start something successful, there'll be copycats straight away. Whatever the business is, they'll
I'm
never.
saying this one because there are, even for my brand.
Yeah, but it's part of an economy. This will always happen.
Of
Every
course.
economy, it's part of nature, right? But like
Yeah.
you said, in order for you to survive, you have to find ways to provide value to maintain your market share in that market that you hope to
And people
dominate.
are
Or
people are not stupid, people will
yeah,
notice copycats, so they will
yeah,
know that they have taken it from you or from someone else. The most
yeah.
important part is you keeping the focus on what you do, and people are going to value that, and you're going to get better and better. But it's always, do not sleep, stay awake and grind. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And find ways to differentiate yourselves from those other brands, whether, like you said, whether it's because you were in the market first, so you have that authoritative figure to be like, hey, we were here first, we've got all the evidence and the value and XYZ. No, yeah, no, completely agree with all the stuff you've been talking about here. I guess kind of just to bring it back to Learnshqip, because we've had a shifting conversation talking
Yes.
about people obviously investing with businesses back home, and how now more than ever it's a lot easier to do so. And we talked about personal brands as well. But I want to talk more about Learnshqip. I want to learn a little bit more about the success you've had with the brand. So it'd be interesting to see what have been some of the biggest mistakes you've made that have ended up being like some of the biggest learning opportunities.
Well, the biggest mistake on me, first of all, was at least in the beginning, was not learning digital marketing. So that was a very, very big gap I had in my skills, because I was trying to be an expert on something I wasn't. So I had a very good background in teaching, but I was a very good teacher, but not a very good marketer, which means I know how to make a good coffee, but I don't know how to bring the customers into the coffee
Mm,
shop, because maybe you know how to make a good coffee because you are a good coffee maker, but no one knows how good you make it. So you have to share your news. So for me, that was a very, very, I wouldn't say mistake, but that was a very, very big gap I had, because I was trying to find customers, and the only way I was trying customers was, let's say, finding customers was about me telling everyone, hey, I'm Klaudio, I offer Albanian courses and things like that, which is normal. You have to promote yourself. But most of the times, people won't care how much you tell them, come to me, come to me, come to me. For example, if you have a coffee shop, you don't tell people to come to your coffee shop. Or let's say, if you sell cookies, you don't tell people, come and eat my cookies. You just give them a cookie. And if they like it, then they will come to your store. The same thing happened with Learnshqip. I was like, look, I'm going to stop doing advertisement. I'm going to stop telling people what I'm offering. Instead, I'm going to give them what they want, which is phrases, languages, culture, educational things. And when I was trying to do that, suddenly it shifted. I told you, in 1 year I had 5,000 followers because I couldn't find how to break the system and just enter in something which was way bigger, because no one was really engaging in my audience. And I was like, look, I'm gonna solve the problem by giving them value. And if they like the value, they're gonna share it, they're gonna click it, they're gonna maybe send a comment and do something like that. And it just started like that. I started to, for example, post something about phrases, post something about colors, and people were liking it, were sharing it. And then suddenly that was like, wow, this is mystery solved, because it was going very quick. And then second year, from 5 we went to 30K, and then now we are to 60K, and hopefully by the end of this year maybe you're gonna hit 100K.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. No, definitely. I think, like you said, it's focusing. I think loads of people focus too much on the product that they forget about how can I distribute it to
Forget about your
regenerate.
product at the beginning. It's always
You know,
about promoting who you are and what you do. That's the most important thing at the very beginning.
yeah, it tends to be quite a common strategy amongst startups as well, where they build a viable product, something that works enough, not to the full extent, but works enough, and then they market it to the desired audience, and then they see how they react. And then if that audience bites, then they're like, perfect, now we can flesh out the full product that we want to flesh out, because we know we're going to generate something from this. But I guess with yours, it's slightly different because you're not building a tech product, you're not building something tangible. What you're
It
building is like a learning
is like a
platform.
service. Let's call it. It's a
Yeah, it's like a
service.
service.
It is a service.
So that it's slightly a little bit more difficult. And I think what's interesting is how you managed to turn yourselves into that media branding side of things to garner people to your site and to be like, hey, actually, not only can I pay to provide a service to learn one-on-one, but now I'm also getting educations for free, which I can share with my kids.
Yes, that's for sure.
And that's one way that you've been doing it as well, which I think is great.
Yes, I mean, definitely. That's something that you have to consider. Whenever you open any sort of brand, don't think about your product first. Meaning that don't think about, oh, I have a phone, buy it. No, it's people, you have to tell the people what does this phone does and why do you have to buy it. So the same happened with me at the very beginning. And keep in mind, I didn't have 60 followers on my first day. So this was a very long, slow procedure, which gave me lots of time to become better and learn all the skills. At the very beginning, I just started by improvising, and then the more you learn, the better you get. Which means I haven't done just my digital marketing. During these 3 years, I have met people from all around the world every single day. Meaning that, for example, today after your class, I'm going to be all around the world. I'm going to go 1 hour in UK, 1 hour in United States, 1 hour in Australia, and etc. So the more people you meet, the more you know the needs people have. So when you know their needs, it's very easy for you now to fill the gap and fill their needs, because you know that, for example, Hazret doesn't know the beginner phrases in Albanian. So I'm going to post those beginner phrases so Hazret can save the post, share it, like it, and then it can benefit to the brand, and also it can benefit to the individual itself.
Mm,
It should be like a win-win. You win
yeah,
something from the engagement, but also the platform and the person that are watching the video or maybe clicking the design can get something. Because some
yeah,
people think, I think that's a misconception. When you open the brand, not everything is about paying your bills. Not everything is about earning money. Not everything is about getting followers. Because I know some people focus on, oh, I have to hit 10,000 subscribers. I have to hit 10,000K. Do not think in that way. The most important thing in growing any platform is giving value. People are not stupid nowadays. If you give them value, they're going to appreciate your work. And then if you do that the right way, sooner or later, you're going to grow. Why? If you give them value, they're going to like it, they're going to support you. And throughout the time, you're going to reach more and more people. But it's always
mm,
about giving value. If you lose that kind of sense, sooner or later, you're going to also lose your customers, because when you open something, it's not just about earning money. Of course, it's very important because you have to pay your bills, but also giving value is going to make the difference between you and the competitors.
mm. Mate, that's very insightful. I'm going to get someone to snippet that and send that all over to people.
Yeah, I mean,
But
I have to be a psychologist someday. Some
no,
students
but
say that.
yeah, no, I think it's a very I completely agree. I think there has to be that value exchange, and I think people forget about that. The other thing that you mentioned, which rings true, is the short sightedness that a lot of people tend to have without realizing that it's short sightedness. Loads of people fail to actually enact a strategy and how that strategy should look like with the right objectives to achieve that strategy. So a lot of the times, like you said, people are just like 10,000 followers, but how do you actually reach 10,000 followers? What are you doing to reach
That's
it?
the key,
And
because
then they get upset, and then they give up, and then they're like, well, screw this. Whereas like,
yeah,
no, well, work backwards. What achieves 10,000 followers? Well, okay, well, I need engagement, I need something fulfilling, and XYZ. Well, here's some examples that can achieve that. So how am I going to do that? Well, let's test out, like you said, let's test out and see how the audience reacts to these phrases. Let's see how they react to these other phrases, and then from there you're getting that that first party, market research, because you yourself are going out there. You're not paying an agency to give you that
yeah, yes.
research. You yourself are going out there and you're doing that research, and you're getting it, and you're taking it back, and you're adapting it to your strategy. And I think that's where people fail. They will have the goals, but they won't work on the strategy, and they won't work on the objectives within that strategy to get to that goal.
And I think people forget most of the time, especially when you are a business owner, or maybe when you manage a business, or maybe when you are part of the business. The most important thing in business is data. Data is everything. And I don't think many people realize that, why data is everything. Once you know what your customers want, because every brand tries to do that. They want to understand what the customer wants. Once they know that, the engagement and the growth is going to be very, very quick. Why? Because you know what they want, and you're going to give it to them. And by giving it to them, you're going to get more engagement, you're going to get more audience, and etc. But as I told you at the very beginning, the most important thing about this is consistency.
Mm.
It doesn't happen in 1 year. It doesn't happen in 1 month. It happens at least 3 years. At least that's my experience, and I'm going to tell you one example for that. So last year, I decided to open my YouTube channel. I was like, look, I'm going to try to do that. And then if it works, maybe. If it doesn't work, I mean, I got something, let's say. So it took me 13 months, 1 year and 1 month to get monetized. So I had to post for 1 year and a half just to get monetized. Now I'm earning, I would say, not much, like 30, 40 euros a month, which is something, let's say. But what I'm trying to show you here is the process. So it took 1 year and a half to earn something for YouTube. Now it's going to take probably 2 or 3 years more to really, really earn something like an income, which means that this won't happen in one day. This won't happen in 1 month. It's going to take a very, very long time. Now, it can work maybe in 2 months, because you never know how the brand can work, but it can also work in 1 year or 2 years, which means whenever you struggle, or whenever you don't have enough motivation, because of course you won't have motivation. You think that I'm always motivated to post everything on my page? Of course I'm not. Sometimes I'm bored, sometimes I'm angry, because we have problems, we are human beings. But it doesn't matter. More than your motivation, more than your desire to grow your brand, is the consistency, because that is going to make you different from the market. If you go to the gym for 2 days and you don't have enough muscle, what do? You quit from the gym, or you go there every day because you know after 1 year you're going to get some muscles?
Yeah,
It is the
definitely
same here. So you
consistency.
have to invest and be consistent, because that's the only thing is going to make the difference between you and your other competitors, let's say.
Mm. Yeah, no, I mean, you kind of brought it back from the beginning, where you mentioned that one of the things that you've learned was being consistent is the key thing to growing your brand. But that goes for everything. That goes for enacting your strategies, and making sure you're hitting those objectives. You've got to be consistent, and you've got to be consistent with yourself, and your own, set your expectations realistically. Because I think not only do we see it in small businesses, but also large businesses. This is a very common thing, is they will set a goal and objective, and if it doesn't succeed, they get very upset, and they focus on the short term monetization. What can I do
Yes.
to bring money in tomorrow, rather than okay, how do I build something that can in the future bring me a bigger investment? And as a business owner, you should always be thinking about the two. You should always be working on short term, and you should always be working on long term, but long term cash to come in. But you should never focus on one more than the other. If you focus on the long-term strategy, then you're not getting enough money to fund your business
Yes.
in the meantime. And if you focus too much on the short-term strategy, you could burn out, or even worse is when the market changes, you've been doing the same thing for so long that you've
You
invested
have
in
to
no.
adapt. That's why. That's the most because you cannot don't remain the same. You have to adapt, and you're gonna see how the time is gonna change. Because Learnshqip wasn't the same on the first year.
Yeah,
Learnship wasn't the same on the second year. It's not now on the third year, and it won't be the same on the fourth year. Let's say next year. So you always have to develop and bring something new because that's how you're gonna succeed. Because people
yeah.
get bored easily. So you have to bring something new once in a while. Otherwise, you're gonna lose the attention.
Absolutely. And markets change, people change, people's expectations change, people's needs and wants change. And if you're in that certain industry, you have to make sure you are, adapting to those wants and needs. No business in the history has stayed the same. I think Nintendo, before they were Nintendo, they sold gum, I believe, or something else. I
Yeah,
might be wrong,
probably.
but they
But
weren't. But they weren't selling video
they
games. They were
were
selling.
Nintendo, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
So they are Nintendo because they are Nintendo now. Because if they were
yeah.
selling gum, they wouldn't be Nintendo. So
Right, and it's the same thing. Even when I worked at startups, they were in one industry, then they shifted to another industry with the tools that they had, and it's something you see all along. And I think that's something to remind people: it's okay to make that shift if it makes sense for the business.
sometimes it's needed. So
Yeah,
even when it's not okay, you have to do it. Otherwise, it's a way of surviving. Sometimes there
yeah.
is no option. You have to change. Otherwise, you won't survive in the market.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. This has been a very interesting conversation because we went from, I generally thought we would be talking a lot more about Learnship, the brand, but I
Yes.
really enjoyed actually just talking to you about your experience living and working in Albania, um, the stuff you've seen, and how people can actually benefit from, you know, utilizing their competitive advantage back home with what they know about the market and actually exerting that knowledge outwards to draw in investment. I think is great, especially if you consider that, hey, look, now with Albania becoming a region where people are looking to invest, you with your market knowledge should be able to corner in investment for people to come in, and that's something we are starting to see. Obviously, as we can imagine, there will always be certain difficulties. I'm not going to talk about
Yeah, of
the
course.
the infrastructure of certain
There
stuff in
is always
Albania
things
that
to
everyone
improve.
knows about.
Yeah, of course. I mean, there is always things to improve, and we are getting better at it. One thing is
Yeah,
for sure, we are improving, and we are improving daily, and hopefully in the next few years, our country is going to be a better country than it is now, and I have no doubts
yeah,
about that it's going to be. And do we have mistakes? Do we have problems? Of course we
yeah,
have, like every country, but we are just trying to do our own thing, and that's the most
yeah,
important thing. Trying to do our work and trying to, be better people and just improve our country.
yeah. I guess from your perspective, then, what would this is a hypothetical, so I imagine you have as much money in the world, but what do you think, or you had the power to change, but what do you think would get people to, I guess, invest more into building businesses back home rather than, like we talked about, most young people are looking to just move out. So what do you think would encourage that?
Well, first of all, I mean, that is a very, very difficult question. So I don't want
Yeah,
to make a promise like the Prime Minister of Albania, but at least I'm going to say it like that's my experience. I live here and it's something that
yeah,
people have to figure out. But as I told you since from the very beginning, I know that there is a very, very misconception here. After you leave school, and if you ask people now, do you want to leave Albania? Most of them will say, I want to leave Albania. If they ask them why, I I'm very, very sure about that. 90% of the answers is going to be the same. They will say that, look, I don't have any future in my profession here. So if you are a teacher, if you are a vet, if you are a doctor, they don't see themselves even finding a job because it's very, very difficult. So, and I'm going to say that whether people like it or not. So Albania has a very, very has a very, very big corruption problem. So once we try to fix this problem, I have no doubts that people will want to stay here and will want to invest here. I do believe that the only thing we have to do is give people what they deserve. If we do that, I'm pretty sure that not everyone, of course, people will leave like everywhere, but
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that if you give people what they deserve, what they worked for, I'm pretty sure that no one is going to want to leave Albania. Because keep in mind, people don't leave Albania because they want to breathe the air fresh of London
Yeah.
or because they want to go and see the Bang Bang. You know, you go there and you see it, it's going to last 5 minutes. And then what are
Yeah.
you going to do? That's the feeling is over. So you're going to think about your family, about your work. Most of the times, people move from Albania because they want to find a better job. Most of the times, they don't find a job in their profession, which means they are forced to move. Why? Because they are basically replacing all of those years of studies and also their profession just for another profession, just to pay their bills. And they are doing this sacrifice not because they want to work as a pizza maker in Britain and they don't want to work as a teacher in Albania. No, they want to work as a teacher in Albania, but because of this corruption problem, most of these people won't get the job they want, and they're gonna try to move to another country. That's the main
Yeah.
reason why I think people have to consider.
Yeah, there has to be, I guess, there has to be that trust, in the country where people feel comfortable enough to be like, yeah, I can bet my working future on here.
It has to be like
Uh,
that, and people have to think about bigger projects and ideas. As I told you, when you have a business idea, don't go straight to open a coffee shop. You know, that's I know that's the first idea people have, but you have to think about how can I help this community. If you have an
mm,
idea, how can I fill this gap, and maybe how can I even hire other people to work in my brand, so they
mm,
won't leave the country, but they're gonna stay here, invest in the country, and just put all of their effort in their homeland.
mm. Also, another thing to, something that you mentioned as well, which is, yeah, like definitely investing back in your community, but also if you have the knowledge, upskilling your community, upskilling your employees, because the whole point, I guess, why we do this, why we do these conversations with everyone, and why I'm a big proponent on this is because I am a firm believer in that. If you can set up a business in Albania, you will then educate those people. Those people in the future will then have the confidence to build something for themselves. They will then take that education, bring it on, and you want that ricochet effect to happen. But if you don't, if you are very selfish, if you are very much like, and this is something unfortunately we see a lot, it's a conversation I've had with previous people where we see, diaspora come back to Albania, they invest, but they don't care about anything else. As long as it's making money, they don't care about training the employees, they don't care
Yes.
about building a culture, they don't care about building a brand. Just make the money and then I'm going back home to
So
spend. And that's
that's it.
also a negative thing, which, I will admit, loads of people, there's a lot of diaspora that do that. They don't actually invest properly, which is such a shame. And, like you said, there's people back home who don't invest properly, but there's also people diaspora who are not investing properly. So it
Yes.
goes both ways. It's not just people back home. It's also people abroad as well. They're not investing properly into their communities. And I think once that mindset is changed and people are actually creating something of lasting value, then, like you said, I think over time those things will compound into something a little bit greater.
And the government has to change the salary. It's something that we always have talked about that. So I mean, and I feel ashamed, to be honest, when I hear, for example, and I have nothing against those nationalities, they are on their rights, but I feel ashamed when I hear people coming from other countries to work in Albania in order to replace the Albanian workers. There is nothing more shameful than that, because you are trying to give to someone, to an Albanian. So you try to give less money to an Albanian and you try to give more money to a foreign person. You
Mm,
know, it's like that's something crazy. Now, why would you hire someone from the Philippines to work as a cleaning lady in your house when you can hire someone from Albania, or
mm,
when you can hire someone from Shkodër or from Tirana, or etc.? Because these are things that can help people in a very, very small way, but it can make a difference in some families.
mm,
So we have to change the salary. People have to get paid more about their service, either a teacher, either a doctor, either whatever you are, because by improving the salaries, people can also, let's say, cover their expenses and also have a better life. You know, people won't want to stay here if they barely pay their bills. So, but if they earn enough, Albania is a very beautiful country. We have our problems, and everyone knows that. But I always say it here: if you earn enough, there is no reason why to live in Albania, because we have all the facilities you need, with our up and downs, of course. But in general, we are not like in Middle Ages. Albania is a very, very safe country. I think that sometimes people have a perception like we are in a war here. No, we are literally 2 hours away from Italy, 1 hour away from Turkey, Greece, or any other country. So
Yeah.
we are in the heart of Europe, and we are very, very safe. We have sea, we have mountains, we are, hospitality, we are friendly people. So that's all about it. We are not like almost dying from the hunger, let's call it.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. And I think that's also something to make clear is
Because some people
when
have this idea, maybe people that haven't been in Albania, they have like,
yeah,
is it safe? I've heard this question, is it safe
yeah,
to come to Albania? It's like, guys, it is more than safe to come here, because no
yeah.
one is gonna hurt you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I guess it's slightly different when me and you are talking about it because we're talking from past experience.
Yes.
And a lot of the times when we complain, it's because of we've seen good, we've seen bad, and we're complaining out of rather for the benefit rather than
We
I'll
are
say
Albanians,
just
so everything we are
yeah,
saying
and
is proved on our personal experience.
yeah,
We are not making politics here. We are not supporting
yeah,
anyone, by the way. We are just
absolutely.
sharing our experience.
Absolutely. And something you mentioned as well is like, yeah, this it's people want to live here. I mean, there's so many people that I hear from everyone who's Albanian in the UK who are like, oh, I would love to like live back home in Albania.
And I feel sorry for the Albanians that move from Albania, work all the year to save some money and come here to spend their
Yeah,
money for 1 month, because
but
it's like
yeah,
the
you
same thing.
hear it all. You hear it all the time. People, oh, I'd love to like move back to Albania. I hear it from my parents, and then it's obviously for parents it's slightly different. They want to stay where their kids are, but they always say, if I didn't, I would move back home. And you hear it from younger kids as well. I'd love to go back to Kosovo and like live there and work there and be part of that, economy. But yeah, there is a lot of work still to be done, and neither you or myself are economic experts. We are just
Yeah, of course, of course.
participants.
We are
We're
just
just
participant in today's society, let's call it.
exactly, we're just participants, but we are both hoping that this conversation and this work we do can benefit others, and people can feel comfortable to have these conversations, these open
Look,
conversations, and
the most
realize
important thing about people have to realize that people are like puzzles, and of course we cannot solve everything, but you are a very, very small, you are a very, very small piece of the puzzle. So maybe you are not important, but guess what happens if that missing puzzle is not solved? You won't make the whole work. So just do your own piece, do your own job, and you don't have to try to change the whole world, because unfortunately you won't change it. So just try to do your own thing, let's say.
yeah, absolutely.
Do your own piece
Perfect.
and do your own work.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I feel like we first when we first started this conversation, I remember the beginning of the call, I said to you like, "Oh, it'll be fairly quick. It'll only be like half an hour."
Yeah, I mean, I think
And
our
like
conversations, yeah.
usual, we're the Albanians at the end of the door who said goodbye 5 hours ago, and we're still at the
Yes,
door talking. So
Albanians are always like this, and I think, yeah, I mean, our conversations, when they start, it's very, very difficult to stop them. So because we
it's
have
very
so many things to discuss.
there's always a lot of stuff to discuss, and this could go on for many hours, whether it's talking about the current economy in Albania, from your experience, whether it's talking about startups in Albania, whether it's talking about the mindset into creating a brand, growing a social media brand. Yeah, there's lots to talk about, and this is conversations we can say for the future. But I guess to kind of end things off nicely, you kind of explained to us one of the biggest mistakes you made and that you've learned from, which is a question we always like to ask our guests. But I guess has there been any books that you've been reading that you'd recommend to our listeners that have inspired you? Doesn't have to be business related. It can be a fiction book.
Yes.
It
Well,
can
I
be
mean, I'm
whatever.
gonna, let's say, share two books. One which
Go
is
on,
Albanian one, and the other one which is, let's say, finance book. So
go
first
on.
of all, the finance book that's my opinion. So whether you like it or not, that's your choice. I'm not saying that this book is gonna change your life. At least on me, it didn't change my life, but it changed the way I see money and the way I see marketing. So I would definitely suggest Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Oh, second person to recommend that from
That's
our
something
guests.
that and as I told you, this in terms of audience, people here are black and white. Some people like it, some people don't. But
Mhm.
what I'm saying is that I'm not saying it's going to change your life. At least me, it helped me a lot in order to see the perception of the money. And then
Mm.
I'm going to mention one Albanian book, which is Ismail Kadare, Chronicles in Stone. I'm
Okay.
not sure if someone has read it. And then another book, which I would definitely recommend it to everyone, and I do believe that this one is going to change your perception about today's world, is George Orwell, Animal Farm.
Oh, very interesting. That's three very good books. I have not read Ismail Kadari's book. I'll definitely need to check that one out. I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I remember reading Animal Farm. So I'll
Animal
need
Farm,
to.
it reminds me sometimes about Albania. Why? Read the book, guys.
That's great. That's great. Three book recommendations. That's fantastic. This is coming to an end, so thank you so much, Claudio. So, I mean, tell people where they can find you. I mean, we'll plug you in anyway, but tell people where they can find you. Tell us about anything exciting you're working on and what they should be expecting.
Well, first of all, guys, you can find me everywhere. The name of the brand is Learnshqip. So we are mostly active on Instagram page. That's our main focus. But you can also find us on TikTok, LinkedIn, Facebook, and also our YouTube channel. Now, the project we are, let's say, focusing this year, and the one I want to share with you is gonna be our YouTube channel. So the idea of this channel is to make it like a channel where you can learn everything. At the moment, we are more focusing about teaching language, but in the next few months, you're gonna see also some videos about our culture, our history. So our Instagram page is gonna be something similar to our YouTube channel, but with some more videos about our culture, our history, and etc. So this is one project that we are keeping in mind to invest, and hopefully we will grow the same as we did on Instagram.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And thank you for everyone joining us. Yeah, we'll put Claudio's information on the link somewhere below. You'll get to see them. Make sure you subscribe. Get your kids learning Albanian. I know I'm always checking out the videos, learning new words. Uh, Guys, thank you for listening to another episode of Tea with ALSA. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel, you're following our socials, you're leaving comments, you're liking them, you're sharing them with all your friends.